What kind of lessons I continue to learn until now. I always say whenever you run a business, by the way, whether it's an agency, whether it's an e-com shop, whatever it is, we're always learning. And your learning gets more and more expensive if you're doing things right. Sometimes you learn by making mistakes, and that's a painful kind of learning, but unfortunately everybody goes through it. Here are some lessons that I've learned from running an agency. Running an agency is hard. I know there's this glorified version that you see on LinkedIn all the time about the side hustle and about starting my own business and how much money I'm making. I always think is one of two things, by the way. There are some people who really firmly believe in fake it until you make it. I talk to some of them kind of in the background and I'm like, oh man, the image that they put on and the persona that they put on is completely different than the reality. I was talking to somebody, and I mean, when you see him on LinkedIn, you think, oh, the guy's doing like 4 or 5 million. He's absolutely successful. I mean, he's somebody who I thought to myself, I'm like, oh my God, I need to learn from him. We get a chance to speak over 2 days and we really hung out. And he's absolutely amazing. I've learned a lot from him, but he has struggles that he doesn't really like to share because people then will start questioning him and kind of like, the persona that he had built. He's worried about like, how do I generate the next sale? Oh, this client is giving me a hard time. How do I maintain my team members and keep them engaged? I'm like, okay, well, this is a completely different image than what you see on LinkedIn or what you see on social media. Running an agency is hard, and I have to start by saying that. And as the agency becomes larger and larger, it becomes harder and harder. If I would do it again, establishing a brand prior to running an agency makes a lot of sense. I think working on the client side before starting an agency would make a lot of sense. That's what I would have done, because you establish relationships, people start trusting you, you establish those connections, and then you can move on to the agency side of things. And that's, by the way, the advice that I gave to my brother who was interested in starting an agency, and he worked with us for a little while. And I told him, listen, you can always start your own agency, but for now, work on the client side, work with companies, continue working in marketing until you reach the level of VP of marketing, establish those connections with a ton of VPs of marketing, and then think about starting your agency if you want. And that's exactly what he has done. He moved now and he's on the client side, moving. He's a director of marketing. It's a fairly successful startup, a very well-funded startup, but his life is much, much easier. So that's one lesson. Lots of times people talk to you about productizing your services. You need to productize your service so you can walk away from it. So anybody could come in and fulfill the line, like, kind of like it's almost like an assembly line of services. And that's how agency works. Listen, we have a process. Our process is absolutely amazing. So many different steps, and we have project management software and project managers. It's a highly integrated process. But the thought that productizing will allow somebody to walk away from business is silly. It's another dream in the sky that some people would like to sell agency owners. It is a lot harder than that. It's not an assembly line. It's not the same as, Ford makes like, a car and there's an assembly line that runs. No, I'm sorry. There's a human element. There's a human touch. There's the creativity. The more you work on the creative side, the more you have to be involved. Yes, you need a process. Yes, you need to follow this process. And it's not like, you give it to you call it productizing. Okay, that's fine. But the reality of it, you have to be involved. How you get out of that is by hiring the right people. You hire the right people who are senior, people who you learn from, people who can help you grow the business. A third lesson that I've learned is you need the right support group. By the right support group, I mean, you can find other agency owners, other advisors. I have people who have supported me who are not in the agency game. One of them is my old boss, who basically ran a very successful consulting business, and then he started a software company. He is somebody who I go to for advice. I have a mastermind group that I wish I've joined much earlier than I've joined it, but this is where we share ideas and we exchange challenges and solutions, because again, I'm trying to minimize the amount of money that I'm spending and making different mistakes as I run my agency. If you talk to different agency owners up to a certain size, up to the point where you're doing $10 million, talent is one of the most difficult questions, by the way, in running an agency, because that's your asset. You're not a factory, correct, that manufactures certain things and you're buying raw material. No, your asset is your people. So you need to know when to hire juniors. You need to know when to hire seniors, how to have that right mix, how to trust them, how to make sure that they're following your process, but at the same time, they have enough space to make their own decisions. So that's always kind of an interesting challenge. Another lesson that I've learned since you've asked, you have to measure everything. internally, externally. This is very important. Sometimes you're too busy to measure. Internally, we measure lots and lots of metrics. How long does it take us to launch an experiment? How long are we spending time on doing customer research? How do we measure the quality of our research? How do we measure the quality of our experimentation program? There's just so many metrics that we report. And externally, for every company that we work with, we're measuring lots of metrics as well, because that's very critical. Every company that comes to us, they say, hey, we want you to help us improve our conversion rates. Very broad statements. When we start our own project, we're tracking anywhere between 15 to 20 different metrics. We track them on a weekly basis. We're evaluating the performance of the site in those 15, 20 different metrics. And we're having internal discussions before even the stakeholders of the company that hired us are bringing an issue to us. We're having a discussion about all these different items to say, hey, we're noticing that the flow from, for example, category page to product page had dropped over here. What's happening in the campaigns? What's happening in the traffic? Is it something that we've done? Another lesson is you have to always be improving. You improve your processes, you improve everything. Now, this is a bit challenging, and it's one of those areas you probably heard me talk about this. I always want to ask my team members, hey, how can we do this better? Sometimes I get responses and I'm like, okay, yes, this is actually a better way and it makes sense. And sometimes we try those things. A couple months later, it's like, oh, well, that was not really a very good idea. We've learned, we made a mistake over here. We've experimented. Let's go back to maybe the old way of how we did things, or let's modify and test again. But you always have to be improving. I'm always on the lookout of ways to say, hey, how can we improve our process? How can we learn from industries away from what we do, not from other agencies, although some other agencies can provide us with some insights, but how can we look at manufacturing and learn from them on how to improve our process? The other lesson that I've learned is you have to choose your area of focus. When we first started Invest, we were all over the place. And I'm taking you back to 2006. We didn't even know initially. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to focus on conversion rates. But we actually thought we can probably help our clients drive more visitors to their site. So yeah, we're going to help you drive visitors. We're going to help you drive converting them, and we're going to help you retain them afterwards. That was what Invest was initially built on. Well, 6 months later, we're like, you know what? This is just too many things to focus on. Let's focus a lot more. And we decided to focus on helping companies improve conversion rates. A couple of years later, we looked and we said, you know what? We're really good at helping e-commerce companies improve conversion rates. Let's focus on that. And for a long time, by the way, that's how Invest was known, helping e-commerce companies improve conversion rates. Then we sort of shifted away because as we became larger, more successful, more and more companies were interested in working with us. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's take on some SaaS clients. Let's take on some B2B clients and lead gen type clients. Truth be told, I've learned through, the hard way that we're really absolutely amazing when it comes to e-commerce. We deliver results. Our e-commerce clients and the companies that we work with are very happy with us. Our B2B clients, lead gen, not always. It's hit and miss. It's kind of a 50-50. It's a flip of the coin. And it's not because we don't put the effort, but our expertise is in e-commerce. We know it really well. We know the funnel really well. We know what type of testing we need to do. So making the decision and the shift to say, okay, you know what? We are going to be working with e-commerce. That's what we're going to be focused on. I'd love to take money from other companies, but you know what? There's plenty of other companies that can do really well with lead gen. There's plenty of other companies that do well with SaaS. We're really better when it comes to e-commerce. So the more you focus, as scary as that sounds, will help you actually grow your agency. The final lesson, if you're running an agency, is you need to control your projects. This is very critical. There are some companies that hire an agency and they hire the agency to execute, to purely execute. Me as a client, I'm going to do the thinking and I'm going to tell you to do 1, 2, 3, 4. In this case, your agency is not an agency. You're really playing the role of freelancer. One of the things that we tell every company that we work with before they sign up with us, we will do it our way. We control the projects. Now, I know there are some companies that hear that and they're like, oh, we don't want to work with you. I'm like, it's fine. We're not a good fit. But if we're going to work together, we do it our way. We control the projects. We come into the project with a lot of expertise because we understand the industry. We've done experimentation for so long, but we're independent. We're going to do the right thing for the project. So the company that we're working with have to trust us. And of course, they'll have the results, correct? I always tell them, look at the results, hold us accountable for the results, but let us do our own thing. If you hire us and then you start saying, do 1, 2, 3, 4, I tell them, you can get your experimentation in much more cheaper ways than hiring us and bringing us on a project and paying us. I'm like, you can hire probably a freelancer to do the kind of work. Client is not going to be happy and we're not going to be happy. Control is very important, making sure that we control the projects, thus, and of course, delivering. By the way, it's not very hard because as an agency, you slowly lose control in every project. Sometimes you lose control really quickly. Sometimes you lose control slowly, but you ultimately lose control. That's the reason I think you have to establish your expertise, your specialty, where people can trust you. And they say, you know what? No, those guys actually know what they're talking about. Me as a business owner, I've hired this agency and I don't want to think about this area. I'm looking at the result. I'm impressed by the result, by the research. They are actually delivering. Hiring this company has been one of the best decisions I've made in my business. To get to that point is not, it's not very easy.